It's official. The Democrats have officially selected Kamala Harris as their nominee for the 2024 presidential race. They had a huge coronation in Chicago. Beautiful, beautiful event, 4 days long. They had a president or former president speaking every single night, and what they hope will be the next president speaking on the final night. A lot of pageantry, a lot of excitement. Joining me to talk about that and so much more, as he does each week for America, it's David Bozell. Hi, David.
Hi, Timothy. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It was an interesting week out there. You know, I was in Milwaukee, of course, for the Republican convention, saw the pageantry, but it was a pageantry of a different sort. The Democrats did a nice job. If you like them and like their message, they had a great convention. I wanted to talk to you about Kamala Harris's speech, and I wanted to break it down into three pieces. One, the speech itself, you know, what the content of the speech, but two, her delivery, how she did, how you thought she did, not whether you like her or not, but did she appeal to middle America in the manner in which she drove that speech? And then finally, the specifics in the speech. Were there any?
It was mostly attacking Donald Trump. I thought her delivery was fine, and she avoided some of the missteps that a lot of folks have seen on social media a ton, where she tends to sort of break out in spontaneous cackling and laughter, things that have tripped her up that make you go, like, are you a serious politician? Are you a serious public servant? She did fine. Does she look presidential, you know, as the Wizards of Smart will say? Probably. My beef with Kamala's speech were just some of the outright falsehoods and lies and invective that she threw at President Trump. For example, she says, talking about Trump, his explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. Explicit is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. He's never suggested anything of the sort. Anything of the sort. And to say that on the national stage, I think was thoroughly unbecoming. We're not going to let him end programs like Head Start for our children in America. I don't know if he's ever mentioned Head Start in his life. I've never heard, I can't remember a single instance where Donald Trump has ever mentioned the program Head Start. She said, all the while he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on the middle class families by almost $4,000 a year. She's talking about the Trump tariffs, which the Biden-Harris administration have kept largely in place the entire time. I mean, she's wrong at calling it a tax on the American consumer, but they've kept them all. So you know, to attack him for his tariff policies, which you've kept, which you could have easily gotten rid of if you wanted to, is just thoroughly disingenuous.
Yeah, the two that stood out to me were she talked about the Middle East and said, now is the time. That's a great line. Yeah. Now is the time for a ceasefire and for the hostages to be released. And I'm thinking, that's a line that every human being on earth likes to see war end. And of course, every human being on earth would like to see hostages released. So I don't know that now is the time any more than it was for the last 10 months. But second, she's one of very few people that actually has the ability and the authority to impact that. So where have they been for 10 months? That was number one to me. Number two, the abortion issue polls very well for Harris, but she's leaning into it completely and disingenuously, because she said Donald Trump, if he is elected, will attempt to, actually didn't say attempt, said will take away a woman's right to an abortion anywhere in the United States with or without Congress. And I'm thinking, first of all, that's not what Donald Trump said. He's been very clear that it's a state-by-state decision and he has no interest. He said it explicitly, using your word, that he has no interest in a federal law, that it's state by state. But second, when she says with or without Congress, you can't sign something like that into being by executive order. It was the single most disingenuous thing said in that speech.
That's right. I mean, sticking on the abortion thing, he says, or she said, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. He's never suggested that ever. ever. I mean, and that's just not only would that be unconstitutional, it's laughable on its face. Again, you listen to that. I listened to these speeches. I listened to both of them, Biden's and Kamala Harris's speeches on Sirius Radio, just to see like what it sounded like without the visual. And so you have to really pay attention to what you're hearing rather than just watching it on television and you get distracted.
I was in the arena for the speech, and she did a great job. She gave a great delivery. And if you are the casual fan, you and I are nerds and we study politics ad nauseum. But if you're the casual follower and it's 90 days till election day, I better start paying attention. She did a great job because they're not listening to the substance. They're looking at the balloons. They're looking at everything. She did a wonderful delivery. And so that's my concern is the media is not doing their job. And that's where I want to go with this is, we keep hearing over the last couple of elections about fact checkers. Where were the fact checkers in this thing? Because so much of what she said turned out to be not true. And yet when you deliver it with a smile and a wave, people that don't know think, wow, that was great. And so I think we've seen a bump in her numbers, obviously, since she jumped in, big bump over what Biden had. But the question is, will anyone in the media hold her accountable at any point during the next 70 days?
Tim, I doubt it. Media Research Center, whose studios I'm borrowing for this today, they had a poll, or they've done their research. 84% of the media's coverage has been pro-Kamala. 89% of their coverage of this campaign has been anti-Donald Trump. It is now an objective fact that the media is pro-Kamala, anti-Donald Trump. Imagine if 20 points of that was shaved in either direction. This would be a landslide if they were just reporting the news. The fact that Kamala's economic advisor went on CNBC the other day and said it was part of her plan. This is the most laughable economic proposal I've ever seen a major candidate. Well, she's made two of them. One was the price controls on groceries. Two was the one that her economic advisor said was in her plan yesterday, which was a 25% tax on unrealized capital gains. You're saying, her team is saying, we don't want Americans investing in America. We want Americans investing in government. And we'll decide what benefits you get out of that investment.
When my son was about 14 years old, he started really paying close attention, and he would sometimes raise ideas or concepts, but in a 14-year-old mind, you hadn't thought about the consequences sometimes. The front end seems like a good idea, and that's what I thought of when I saw that proposal. The 25% tax on unrealized investment gains means the money's not in hand. Today the stock could be up, and if I happen to hit that on tax day and the stock goes down tomorrow, I'm out of luck. It doesn't make Economics 101, the very first introduction to economics, it doesn't make sense. And that's all I could think of was, do they actually believe this, or is this just a line they're throwing out there in that class warfare? Oh, rich guy bad.
Well, if that's the line that they want to throw out there, to do that on CNBC seems to, that doesn't make any sense to me. Your audience at CNBC is not the audience that proposal is supposed to attract. It would really just make that audience angry as hell. And that's been the reaction. But this idea that you would see, with seriousness of purpose, tax Americans on monopoly money. It's not money at all. It's just a number on a computer. You're not using it at all. And to introduce that into the lexicon as a serious policy proposal, and then to be, when a couple of the CNBC anchors were like, okay, well, that makes zero sense. And to push back and say, in effect, you're just these old stiffs at the party. We're going to start to implement this stuff. Man, dangerous stuff. But this is where the media needs. This is where you would hope that they would get involved here. Investigating her policy prescriptions, so-called prescriptions, but also how about the investigation, how she got here in the first place, right? We still don't really know why Biden went from Friday of that weekend, I'm in the race, I'm in the race, I'm in the race, to Sunday tweeting out a statement, I'm out.
Although Nancy Pelosi has dropped some breadcrumbs for us in some of her comments. Final question before we go, and that is, you know, we see all the polls that say 50 to 49 him, 50 to 49 her. Everyone says, oh my gosh, it's a dead heat either way. None of that matters. The national numbers don't matter. You know that, I know that. We vote state by state by state. So when we break it down state by state by state, there are a handful of states that are going to decide this thing. In 2020, I got 50 out of 51 correct. When you include DC, there's 51. I got 50 out of 51 correct. I didn't get Georgia right. Everything else, and that's important that you break it down state by state. When we look here, it's really, really tight, and it comes down to Georgia and Nevada and Arizona, I think. They float out there that North Carolina is close. He'll win North Carolina. They float out there that Pennsylvania is close. He's going to win Pennsylvania. He's not going to win Michigan and Wisconsin. And so when you break all that down, it comes to 3 states. That's Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. What do you see?
Well, I don't like the fact that he's spending a lot of time in North Carolina. I wonder who the person in North Carolina who could say to him, hey, you've got this in the bag, you know, don't spend any more time here. You know, this is one. But because he was there last week and Kamala was there last week, so maybe they know something more about North Carolina than is on the surface. But I think you're right. I think it becomes to Georgia. I am not as bullish on Pennsylvania as you are, not because of the energy and get out the vote operations. The fact that they're voting in about like a week through the mail drives me nuts. So I think this thing comes down to Georgia and Arizona. I don't like that Kari Lake is 10 points underwater in Arizona. That drives me bonkers and has the potential to drive Trump's numbers down. So I think he's to win this thing, he's got to pull off Nevada and Georgia, and I think really Georgia is the prize.
I agree. I think I'm with you 100%. I think there's a very strong likelihood Trump loses Arizona. Thank you, Kari Lake. And I think Georgia is it. And, you know, when I talked to Laura Trump, she talked about their effort to poll watch, to try to make sure there were no shenanigans going on. I would spend an enormous amount of money, time, and effort putting poll watchers at every single precinct and every voter collection area in the greater Atlanta area, because that's where it's going to either be won or lost.
I agree.
You know, and win, lose, or draw, all I ask is an honest election. And I worry when you go to Detroit, if Michigan is tight, you go to Detroit, it's never honest. When you go to Atlanta, it's not honest. So if we can clamp down as best we can on those and not hear all kinds of complaints afterwards that, oh, the election was stolen from me by whomever loses, that would be my fantasy for the year. David, we got to run for America. He is David Bozell from the Washington Times. I'm Tim Constantine. Thank you.